The protagonist in this story was a gaming addict just like you. He kept smashing buttons as he battled a powerful monster while feeling anxious, since he only needed one more to finish his collection quest. After some time, he finally defeated the monster, and his eyes locked onto a rare 5-star dragon scale. Overcome with excitement, he shouted at the top of his lungs in celebration. A moment later, he was shocked to find himself floating somewhere strange. Someone informed him that he had gotten too excited, fallen down the stairs, and died. Truck-kun? No, it was Stairs-kun. Turning around, the protagonist saw a figure who called herself a god, but she was unlike any god he'd known on Earth. The protagonist couldn't believe it. He hadn't even completed his collection yet. He wasn't just a gaming addict. He had loved collecting things since childhood. The god chuckled as she watched him. Even as an adult, he loved gathering in-game items as each had its own story. He fantasized about them, fully immersed in the rich worlds of his games. Mommy God suggested reincarnating the protagonist into a world where he could collect things to his heart's content. The protagonist, curious, asked what God meant. Then she admitted she had chosen him to live in a new world. He couldn't believe it. The typical trope from anime and manga was actually happening to him. God began explaining that gods regularly poured mana into the worlds they watched over. However, since she handled it alone, she struggled to measure it properly and sometimes ended up throwing the world's balance off. That's where the protagonist would enter to the scene. He would act as her medium, spreading mana evenly across the world like seasoning in a soup. She reassured him that his body wouldn't be harmed in the process. When the protagonist asked why she chose him, God smiled and pointed out his intense obsession with collecting things. His love for gathering items had become such a deep part of him that it lingered in his soul even after death. She added that her world was full of magical items like those he had loved collecting in fantasy games. The protagonist was stunned but intrigued. Though he had some doubts about God's words, his short life so far made him eager to seize this opportunity. He accepted the role and asked God to send him to her world. Pleased, she left the task to her collector. A boy soon woke up beneath the shade of a tree. At first he thought he was dreaming, but soon he realized he was truly in another world. Looking at his reflection in a nearby river, he noticed he was younger now. He wondered if God had made him younger to help his body handle the new world, and appreciated that she'd placed him close to a water source. He could hardly believe it. He had been reincarnated. Smiling, he embraced his new beginning. This was the start of Shuu Sozai's item-gathering life in another world. After a while, Shou realized he was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Knowing he had to survive, he decided to find some fresh water first. Though he doubted the water would be safe to drink, he tried to inspect it. Suddenly, a system window appeared, providing information about the water. It was drinkable and mineral-rich river water. Shou remembered the god had mentioned such conveniences. Let's rewind to the time before Shou arrived in the other world. Since she was asking for a favor, God offered to grant him any request. Shou, thinking about his abilities, asked what kind of world she ruled over. God explained it wasn't too different from the game that had led to Shou's death. There were both magic and terrifying monsters and, as she'd said earlier, plenty of magical items scattered around. Shou concluded it was a world of swords and sorcery, like the ones he often played in games. While he thought it was an ideal place for adventure, he doubted a simple salaryman like himself could survive there. Realizing he would likely face monsters soon, and knowing he wasn't athletic, Shou asked God to give him just enough power to live a carefree life while collecting materials in her world. He didn't want an instant game over, so he requested a bit of ability to sense danger. God then suggested that Shou wanted to be a collector who could live without a care in the world. Shou replied, saying he only wanted enough to avoid getting himself killed. God giggled, finding it hard to believe that Shou could ask for such a thing so casually, knowing it was a bold request. Shou finally understood the power he'd received from God. He had no choice but to trust the information from the item window. When he scooped up some river water, he found it tasted surprisingly good. Deciding to take some with him, he searched through his sling bag. To his surprise, the bag seemed to have a vast interior, allowing him to pull out numerous items, everything from essentials to weapons. Shou was shocked to realize just how many things he was carrying. Next, he found a letter that included a manual, describing a magic bag like those commonly seen in isekai stories. Shou also discovered that he possessed the skills Detect and Appraisal. With Appraisal, he was able to confirm that the river water was safe. Detect, on the other hand, was a unique skill he hadn't seen before. Following the manual's instructions, he focused, sensing everything around him. When the moment felt right, he activated the skill. Shou emitted a wave that bounced off objects nearby, making them glow. He soon realized the glowing items were materials he could gather. Shou smiled and ran off in a certain direction. Soon, he found a beautiful flower and wondered if it might be useful. Using his appraisal skill, he discovered it was an herb for making a salve to heal wounds. Shou's eyes lit up, thrilled that he could gather materials with his own hands. He even expressed affection for this first material he ever collected. He then recalled how God had called his request bold. Shou realized his words might have been misunderstood, but having appraisal and detect skills felt like a cheat for a collector like him. For now, he planned to keep a low profile and avoid any possible dangers. He stored the herb in a bottle and decided to head to a nearby village called Fermi, following the river. But he froze, suddenly realizing something. Detect had found even more materials he could collect nearby. Soon after, Shou, looking tired, complained that he had overdone it with gathering materials. Thanks to his magic bag, he didn't feel any extra weight despite collecting a large amount of items. Meanwhile, his detection skill had improved, but it filled his vision with distracting lights. To fix this, he decided to narrow his search to focus on Wagner fangs specifically. It worked, reducing the number of lights considerably. At that moment, Shou noticed one of the lights moving. He quietly checked behind a bush and spotted a vicious-looking monster. Careful not to make any noise, he used his appraisal skill on it. The monster was called a Wagner and had a danger level of E, but its senses were weak. Shou quickly ran as far as he could before stopping to catch his breath. He was surprised to realize that his skill could detect living creatures. On the bright side, he figured he could use it to avoid monsters, making it useful even if it wasn't combat-related. With night approaching, Shou decided to head quickly toward the nearby village. Suddenly, Shou noticed a golden light nearby and wondered if it was some kind of material. He hesitated, but his urge to collect things won out. So far, he had only come across blue or purple colors. Eager to investigate, he ran toward the golden light and found a red, plate-like object lying on the ground. Lifting it up, he used his appraisal skill on it. To his surprise, it was a red dragon scale. Shou was stunned. In the last game he'd played, this had been the rarest item. He could hardly believe he was holding it in his own hands. Shou then remembered that rare items like this usually came with tough battles. Quickly, he used his detect skill, but nothing appeared in his detection range. Feeling relieved, he figured this was like a first-day login bonus. Realizing that the color of the light likely indicated rarity, he decided he'd investigate more about it later. After admiring the dragon scale, Shou got to his feet and continued on his way, wondering what kind of place Fermi Village would turn out to be. After some time, Shou finally arrived at Fermi Village, where a man with a fierce stare greeted him. Nervously, Shou asked if he was indeed in Fermi Village, and the man confirmed it with a slightly intimidating tone. Holding a sharp spear, the man questioned what Shou was doing in this quiet countryside. Shou took a moment to calm himself and introduced himself as a traveling material collector. The man seemed pleased to hear this, assuming Shou could handle the monsters in the nearby forests. He introduced himself as Roland and apologized for his intimidating approach, explaining that visitors were rare in their remote village. Shou was glad to meet him, though Roland noted how unusual the name Sozai Shuu sounded. Shou explained that Sozai was his family name and Shuu was his given name. Roland looked surprised, mistaking Shou for a noble, as only nobles had family names in this world. Realizing this, Shuu quickly clarified that Sozai referred to his work in material collection. Roland laughed and formally welcomed him to Fermi Village, giving directions to the local inn, which Shou gratefully accepted. As Shou walked through the village streets, he noticed the villagers were friendly, with children waving at him without fear. He felt relieved by the welcoming atmosphere. Eventually, he arrived at the inn. Though he hadn't seen the local script before, he understood it, thanks to God's divine power. In the reception area, he noticed no one was there at first. Suddenly, a young girl appeared, asking if he was a guest. When Shou confirmed, she ran to the back, calling for her mother. The mother soon came out and asked if he was a traveler, to which Shou replied yes and introduced himself. The landlady introduced herself as Anna and her daughter as Nico. Shou was happy to meet them and asked if they had a room available. Anna confirmed they did, explaining they didn't get many guests in the countryside. Shou then asked for the price for one night. Anna explained that it would be 4 bronze coins for a room, with an extra coin covering both dinner and breakfast. Shou was relieved to hear the price but suddenly realized a problem. He anxiously mentioned that he came from a distant country and didn't know the local currency. Anna kindly explained that coins ranged from copper to platinum, increasing in value by tens. She added that 1 silver coin was equal to 10 bronze coins. Hearing this, Shou asked to check in for 10 nights. Anna welcomed him warmly, asking Nico to show him to his room. Shou admired the inn, which looked quite luxurious, and Nico proudly mentioned they took great care of their food and rooms. Shou asked if they had baths, to which Nico exclaimed that such things weren't available in the countryside. A bit disappointed, Shou was comforted when Nico offered to provide hot water and a towel for an extra coin. Nico then led him to their largest room, and Shou thanked her. Nico asked if he needed anything else, and Shou explained he had gathered materials from the forest. He wondered if there was a nearby shop where he could sell them. Nico remembered a shop owned by someone named Podan, and Shou was pleased to hear about it. Nico promised to take him there, suggesting they meet on the first floor after he had rested. Just as Shou thought Nico had left, she peeked back into the room and reminded him to call her if he needed anything. Shou promised he would. He lay down on the bed, grateful for the kindness of everyone in the village. Shou quickly sorted through his bag, checking which items he should sell. When he saw the dragon scale, he hugged it tightly and decided not to part with it. Afterward, he headed downstairs to ask if Nico was busy. Nico enthusiastically replied that she wasn't and pleaded with her mother to let her go out, mentioning that she had promised to help an important guest. Her mother, Anna, reluctantly agreed and gave her permission. Once outside, Shou knew Nico was just looking for an excuse to avoid her household chores. Nico corrected him, saying that helping a guest was still a chore. She glanced at Shou's bag and asked what he had inside. But Shou told her not to expect anything too exciting. Soon they reached Podan's variety shop and stepped inside. Nico guessed no one was home since there was no answer when they entered. Shou was amazed by the wide range of items on display, from things he recognized to mysterious objects he didn't. He suddenly remembered that he hadn't been given any cooking tools by God. Then his eyes landed on something familiar. Using his appraisal skill, he discovered it was a magic stove, which looked like a portable cassette stove. Shou began to imagine grilling the mushrooms he'd gathered in the wild. However, when he checked the price, it was a staggering 1 platinum coin, and he doubted he'd have enough even after selling his materials. Just then, a man hurried inside, apologizing as he entered. He explained that he had been out gathering supplies, since he rarely had customers around at the same time. His name was Podan, and Nico introduced Shou as the customer she'd brought over. Podan was happy to finally meet the traveler he'd heard about. He introduced himself as the owner of the variety store and asked if he could take a look at the materials Shou brought. He was especially pleased that someone had brought items from outside the village. When Shou set his bag on the table, Podan examined it closely and quickly realized it was a magic bag. Shou was surprised that Podan could tell with just a glance. Podan explained that he had once seen a magic bag while gathering supplies in a large city. A magic bag was something only high-ranking wizards had managed to perfect, and with the technology now lost, it was no longer available on the market. Podan eagerly asked where Shou had gotten it. Shou was stunned to learn that the magic bag was rare, but he couldn't tell Podan it came from a god. He pretended to cry, saying it had been given to him by someone dear who had already passed away. Podan assumed it was an inheritance and praised Shou's strength in accepting it, apologizing for his insensitive question. Podan turned his attention back to evaluating the materials. Shou felt a little guilty for lying. Podan checked over the materials. For the flora-type items, he offered 7 copper coins and 1 silver coin, and for the Wagner fangs, he offered 3 silver coins. Shou realized that the colors shown by his detect skill really indicated the material's value. Podan was much more impressed with the freshly molted white snakeskin, which Shou thought would be worth around 5 or 8 silver coins because it glowed orange. To his surprise, Podan offered 4 gold coins for it. Shou and Nico were shocked, which Podan misunderstood, so he raised his offer to 6 gold coins. Nico grumbled about the high price, noting that snakeskin molts were often just lying around. Podan explained that pure white snakeskin sparkles in the light and is highly valued as a material for bags carried by noblewomen. He suggested selling it in the capital for an even better price, but Shou decided to let Podan handle it. Surprisingly, another of Shou's materials, moongrass, was valued at 3 gold coins. Nico was curious why a simple weed was so expensive. Shou explained that it absorbs moonlight to bloom and its nectar has healing properties. Podan was impressed by Shou's knowledge, though it was actually due to Shou's appraisal skill. Shou had come mainly to learn the market prices of materials, but he ended up finding someone he could trust. Soon after, Podan paid Shou with a pouch containing 10 gold and 2 silver coins. Nico wondered aloud if Shou earned a living just by collecting materials. Podan admitted it was usually difficult, but to him, Shou seemed like a skilled collector. Shou laughed it off, saying his skill was doing most of the work. For now, he'd filled his pockets and learned about the market prices. As Shou was about to excuse himself, Podan asked for a favor. He wanted Shou to find full moon grass. Shou felt confused, but Nico understood that Podan wanted the flower for his wife's birthday. Podan explained that the flower, called full moon grass, only bloomed under a full moon and symbolized a happy and lasting love. However, it bloomed for a short time and was difficult to find. Shou wanted to help but thought he might need some luck. He could use his detect ability, but he didn't want to give Podan false hope. Podan then sneaked up behind Shou and noticed he had been eyeing the magic stove. He encouraged Shou to test it out. All Shou needed to do was place a mana stone into the glass container, since that was the stove's fuel. When Shou examined it, he discovered that mana stones were crystallized mana from monsters' bodies. He realized that if he used Detect on a mana stone, he might locate nearby monsters. Podan then got his attention again, showing him how to operate the magic stove. Shou and Nico were both impressed once they saw it light up. In addition, Podan mentioned that he had an excellent stock of dried meat, bread, and spices. He filled Shou's mind with thoughts of cooking delicious meals effortlessly. Then he offered to sell Shou the stove for only 5 gold coins, and Shou eagerly accepted. However, Podan's wife's birthday was only 4 days away. Nico felt confident that Shou would find the full moon grass, but Shou was unsure since he had never seen one before. Nico suggested that her father, who had spent years exploring the forest, might know where to find it. Shou then asked Nico to introduce him to her father. Nico's father turned out to be Roland, the village guard Shou had met before. Roland learned that Shou had taken Nico on a date, so he jokingly punched him on the shoulder. Anna, however, told Roland to quit teasing Shou and to come help her instead. Roland chuckled and told Shou to look forward to his wife's cooking. Nico quickly realized no more introductions were needed. That night, Shou fell into bed, exhausted yet wide awake. Remembering a book he had in his magic bag, he pulled out a beginner's spellbook asterisk. He figured learning some magic could be useful. The spellbook explained that magic largely depends on the user's imagination. Shou assumed it was similar to how he had used appraisal and detect before. He skimmed through some fire magic spells but knew it'd be risky to try them indoors. Then he noticed a spell called Light Ball. Concentrating, he pictured the magic forming, and suddenly his room lit up brightly. So brightly, in fact, that the whole village was briefly illuminated. Shou yelled out, momentarily blinded by his own spell, almost like a flashbang in CS2 or Valorant. Hearing the commotion, the innkeeper and his family rushed to check on him. In a weak voice, Shou assured them he was okay, realizing he had a bit more to learn about controlling his magic. Shou slowly opened his eyes and found himself face to face with God, who welcomed him warmly. She praised him for doing well on his first reincarnation. Shou quickly assumed he must have died on the very first day, which made God slightly annoyed, as if her world was being treated like a second-rate game. She realized she might have expected too much from him and clarified that she was just checking in on how things were going. She asked him how his first day had been. Shou excitedly replied that it was amazing, rattling off comments about the skills in the world, until God had to ask him to slow down. She was pleasantly surprised to see that he was enjoying himself. Even though Shou seemed to be adjusting well, God asked if he was struggling with anything. He mentioned that a simple basic spell came out way too powerful, and he wondered if she had given him the wrong magic book. God explained that even beginner spells could be very strong if the user had a lot of mana, and for Shou it wasn't surprising at all. She reminded him that this was exactly the power he had wished for. Shou looked confused, so she reminded him of how he'd asked for the strength to defeat monsters and gather materials without much effort. Shou suddenly remembered her calling his request bold. So that asterisk was what she meant. He then clarified that by without a care, he only meant he wanted to be able to pick wildflowers, gather berries, or mine for rare ores in peace. God recalled how Shou had fought a terrifying dragon, but Shou quickly pointed out that was from a game. Since God was using him as a medium, she figured it should be fine for him to have this high level of mana. She wondered why he was even concerned about being strong. She reassured him that the spell had simply scaled to his mana level, and once he got used to it, he would be able to control it better. Shou promised to give it his best effort. God then mentioned that it was time for him to return and enjoy her world fully. Shou thanked her and promised he would do just that. Shou woke up in his room and went downstairs, where Anna asked if everything was okay since he hadn't come down for dinner. Shou explained that he'd just been tired and had fallen asleep. Curious, Anna mentioned that a bright flash had come from his room and asked what it was. Shou quickly made up an excuse, saying he'd picked up something unusual. Just then, his stomach rumbled, and Anna urged him to have a big breakfast to make up for the missed dinner. Delighted, Shou asked if he could eat everything, excited at the thought of a hearty meal. It had been a while since he'd enjoyed breakfast like this, and he wasted no time digging in. The bread and dried meat were satisfying, but the soup was exceptional. Without hesitation, Shou asked Anna for seconds, which she laughed about and happily agreed to serve. After Shou had finished eating, Roland returned from his morning patrol. Shou greeted him, surprised to see him working so early. Roland explained that he often did rounds outside the gate but was more interested in what had happened in Shou's room. Shou then remembered he had something to ask Roland, so they sat down to discuss the full moon grass. Shou mentioned that he'd received a request from Podin and heard from Nico that Roland had spotted the grass once before. Roland, calling Shou a smooth talker, admitted he'd seen it ages ago but couldn't remember the exact location. Shou only wanted a few clues and promised that if he found any, he'd give one to Roland to gift to Anna. Roland recalled seeing it in the forest, glowing in a sunny spot, where a single beam of light was shining through. Shou noted this, realizing that full moon grass might grow best in direct sunlight, though he remembered Nico saying it needed moonlight. Thanking Roland for the information, Shou decided to search outside even if he wasn't entirely sure where to start. Roland wished him luck as he prepared to set out. The next day, Shou headed south as Roland had advised. Roland had once gotten lost in the southern area and noticed plenty of full moon grass there. Though the hint was vague, it was better than nothing. As Shou walked alone, he felt the wind and smelled the grass, which made him a bit sentimental until he remembered he had something to do first. He pulled out his spellbook to practice some magic. Shou hadn't tried fire magic yet and thought it would be useful for camping later. After spending some time reading the instructions, he focused until he managed to produce fire. Unfortunately, it was too large and would likely start a wildfire. Panicking, Shou quickly flipped through the spellbook until he found water magic and used it to douse the flames. But this spell was also uncontrollable and he ended up soaking himself. As his clothes dried in the sun, Shou searched for other spells he could keep within his hands. He soon found a spell called Freeze. He joked to himself that he should be careful not to start an ice age. Hoping the third time would be the charm, Shou cast Freeze. Everything around him in a small area froze. Though it was bigger than he expected, it was manageable. He continued practicing this spell and searched for others that might be easier to control. Soon after, Shou reached the southern forest that Roland had mentioned. The trees were so dense that they made it feel like night, even though it was midday. Shou took out a mana stone and used it as a target for his detect skill, allowing him to avoid encountering monsters. With a single use, Shou pinpointed the locations of all the creatures in the forest, feeling grateful to God for granting him such a useful skill. Now that he could move freely, Shou entered the thick forest. Finding the full moon grass wasn't easy though, as there were many distractions along the way. Knowing the value of certain materials, he couldn't just ignore them. He also found some edible-looking plants and mushrooms that he thought he could bring back for the villagers. One type of grass caught his attention for making an oddly satisfying noise when pulled. Gathering materials by hand gave Shou a thrill he'd never felt in games. Even the exhaustion and hunger he experienced as he walked and collected were new to him. With his stomach growling loudly, Shou decided it was time to eat. Noticing that it was already noon, he rummaged through his bag and brought out his cooking essentials, including a magic stove. Shou also brought along some ingredients. He chopped up the vegetables he'd gotten from Podan and tossed them into the pot. He picked a few mushrooms he'd recently gathered and threw them in as well. After turning on the magic stove, Shou felt relieved to see the flame set just right. He gave the vegetables a quick sauté, although he found it a hassle not being able to cook two things at once. He thought about getting a second magic stove to make things easier. Refocusing on his cooking, he poured Anna's special soup into the pot full of veggies, glad they had some leftovers. Soon, the mushroom and root vegetable soup was ready. While at it, Shou decided to make some side dishes. He pulled out an extra large piece of bacon from his magic bag, unable to resist buying it when he saw it hanging in Podan's shop. He sliced it thickly and placed it in a skillet. The sizzling sound made his hunger even stronger. To finish things off, he cracked a few eggs and made sunny-side-up eggs, completing a perfect bacon and egg meal. When it was finally time to eat, Shou savored the delicious soup, noticing how the mushrooms really brought out the flavor. After finishing the soup, he moved on to the bacon, enjoying its juicy, rich taste. The hearty flavor balanced perfectly after a sip of the soup. Next, he dipped a piece of bacon into the egg yolk, feeling almost guilty for enjoying such a meal all to himself. With each bite, Shou found himself at a loss for words, simply knowing he felt incredibly content. After finishing, he gave his thanks and realized there was something special about eating in the wilderness. Now that he was full, it was time to continue his search for the full moon grass. Night fell, and Shou returned looking downcast. Ronald welcomed him back and asked how the search had gone. Shou replied that he hadn't seen anything at all. Ronald patted him on the back, encouraging him not to feel discouraged since there was always tomorrow. Shou nodded in agreement and complimented Ronald for working late into the night. Another guard chimed in, mentioning that Ronald had been waiting for Shou, worried he might have gotten lost or into trouble. The guard then suggested Shou take Ronald home since he was becoming a nuisance. Ronald shrugged, saying he just felt uneasy thinking of a guest not returning to the inn. Shou thanked Ronald, commenting that he was kinder than he looked. Ronald, in response, gave Shou a playful smack on the head. The two men returned to the inn, where Nico eagerly greeted them. She asked Shou what he had collected that day. Ronald warned his daughter to be gentle with Shou as he hadn't had much luck, but then Shou took out the materials he'd gathered. Nico and Ronald were momentarily speechless. Ronald couldn't believe Shou had been acting so down when he'd managed to collect such valuable items. Soon after, Shou woke up the guard from before, ready to head back to the southern forest. He said he had one more day before the deadline and needed to find the full moon grass before the day ended. The two praised each other for working hard so early in the morning. Shou then handed the guard a coffee from Anna, and the guard was incredibly grateful. As Shou left, the guard remarked on how honest Shou was. Out of nowhere, Podan appeared and agreed, sharing how he had struggled to find a full moon grass himself but always failed. He was glad Shou had taken on the request and had a gut feeling that Shou would succeed. Back in the dense southern forest, Shou remembered that full moon grass glowed under moonlight, realizing it would be easier to spot in the dark. However, he knew monsters were more active at night. With no other option, the birthday was the next day, Shou used his detect skill to locate nearby monsters. Carefully, he searched high and low for the full moon grass, but despite all his efforts, he still couldn't find it. To make matters worse, the moon was beginning to set, and he knew he'd be out of time when the sun rose. Suddenly, the moonlight shone in a certain spot. Shou noticed this and quickly made his move. However, a bear monster appeared behind him. Shou's legs gave out and he fell to the ground. He had been cautious until that moment but forgot about his detect skill. He tried to run away but froze when he realized something. He would be in trouble if he moved carelessly, and the bear monster was watching him closely as well. Shou tried to calm down and used his appraisal on the bear monster. It turned out to be a B-ranked blue grizzly that would immediately attack anyone who turned their back to it. Shou was glad he hadn't run away, otherwise he would have been dead meat. It was a close call, but he also noticed that the monster could drop top-notch materials. He wanted to bring back those materials, but the blue grizzly was B-ranked, and for some reason it looked incredibly fierce. The blue grizzly then let out a loud roar. Shou panicked and used freeze. In an instant, the blue grizzly turned into a popsicle, and Shou was surprisingly relieved that he had saved himself. Seeing the blue grizzly immobile, Shou felt grateful that he had practiced a lot. He couldn't believe he could freeze such a huge monster in just a second and credited God for it. Just then, he recalled his initial goal. Under the moonlight, he saw a flower in full bloom. He picked it up and appraised it. It turned out to be the full moon grass he had been looking for. At least he finally found it. Shou placed the prized full moon grass inside a glass container and admired it for a while. He then quickly put it into his magic bag to preserve its glow for as long as possible. Next on Shou's list was the frozen blue grizzly. He wondered what to do with it. He thought about butchering it into pieces to carry back, but he didn't know how to butcher an animal. He assumed it wouldn't fit in the magic bag, but surprisingly, the frozen monster went inside. When he saw it disappear from sight, Shou couldn't believe it had really fit. He thought it wouldn't work since he had read in the bag's description that it wouldn't allow living things inside. He concluded that the blue grizzly was already dead. Nevertheless, everything worked out, and Shou's next move was to deliver the full moon grass to Podan. The next morning, Shou rushed into Podan's shop. Podan was nowhere to be found, but a beautiful woman was inside cleaning the store. She had a charming demeanor and claimed it was their first time meeting. Just as they were about to introduce themselves, Podan appeared, quickly grabbed Shou's hands and thanked him for his hard work. He then introduced his wife, Sanalia. She thanked Shou for taking care of her husband. Seeing how beautiful Sanalia was, Shou realized why Podan was going to such great lengths for her birthday. With a wink, Podan asked what Shou came for. Shou understood the message and said he came for the magic stove. He explained that he wanted something similar, and Podan guided him to another room. Sanalia was left feeling confused. Once inside the room, Podan asked about his request. Shou smirked and told him not to worry. He pulled out the full moon grass, and Podan looked pleased. He held it up high, admiring its radiant glow. Podan thanked Shou, saying this gift would make his wife happy. Shou expressed his pleasure in working with him. On the way home, Shou realized he was no longer collecting things just for himself. He was also helping others in the process. He wanted to return to the Inn family and share the good news with them. Back at the inn, a pouting Nico greeted Shou. He apologized and said he wanted Nico to see it too. In a strict voice, Nico said she understood that it was for Sanalia's birthday, which was why Shou went directly to Podan's place. She wanted at least a glimpse of the rare grass to ease her worries. Anna intervened, telling Nico not to put Shou on the spot like a jealous wife. Hey, writer, that's an FBI-attracting line there. Back with Anna, she told Nico to simply ask Sanalia later for a look. This way she could share in the happiness as well. Nico agreed. Anna then asked Shou if he wanted to eat something special since it was meant to be a celebration of his success. Now that she mentioned it, Shou asked Anna to butcher something for him. Anna wondered if it was a fish or something similar, but she never expected it to be a frozen blue grizzly. Both Anna and Nico turned pale and screamed at the top of their lungs. They dropped to the floor and Anna struggled to find the right words. Shou looked confused, as blue grizzly was known to be edible. Roland, who heard Anna's and Nico's screams, barged into the kitchen and freaked out as well. He shouted the blue grizzly's name at the top of his lungs, accidentally letting their neighbors hear him. Everyone panicked and assumed a monster was attacking the inn. Hearing the chaos around him, Shou realized he had messed up. After that, Shou continued searching for materials near Fermi village. It took him a month before new discoveries became rare. Then we saw Podan examining something he had never seen before. Shou explained that it was a type of vegetable called gogogi, which was used in medicinal brews. Looking at a record book, Podan confirmed that it was indeed gogogi. Podan mentioned that there shouldn't be gogogi around the village, and Shou agreed he had gone a bit overboard. Shou said it would be a valuable ingredient, Podon thanked him for bringing in such a rare material, and everyone really appreciated Shou's contribution to the village. Podon then wondered if Shou felt trapped in their small village. Shou admitted that he was starting to feel that way, and shared that he wanted to move on to the next place. Podon expected this and agreed that they couldn't keep someone like Shou in their village. Shou insisted it wasn't like that at all. Podon looked forward to seeing where Shou would go after leaving their village. He wanted to give him a farewell when Shou left. Shou truly appreciated Podon's kind words. Shou also told the people in the inn. Nico was surprised to learn that Shou was leaving. Shou mentioned that he had saved enough money thanks to Podon and that his belongings were already packed. Nico said it would be boring once Shou left. Anna teased her daughter, saying that Nico had gotten attached to Shou. Nico denied it, and Anna encouraged her to be honest. Roland then asked where Shou would go next. Shou said he would head to the nearest big city called Grandel. When he heard that, Roland agreed it was the best place for someone like Shou since the city had many adventurers and a constant flow of people. He mentioned there were even crystals in the nearby mountains. Shou was surprised to hear that he would see many new things. Roland claimed it wouldn't just be Nico who would miss Shou. Things would be quieter without him. He said Shou had been a great help since he arrived in their village. The family of three hoped they could continue looking after Shou for a bit longer. The day of Shou's departure arrived, and he bowed respectfully to everyone, thanking them for everything. Anna said they should be the ones thanking him since the village became vibrant because of his presence and the rare materials he brought. A kid called him Bear Slayer and asked him to take care. That moment stuck with him, giving him a new nickname. Nico tugged at his robe, asking Shou to promise that he would come back. Shou smiled and promised to return to their inn. Roland then appeared, vowing not to let Shou take his daughter away. He respected Shou, but when it came to his daughter, it was a different story. Anna suggested it wouldn't be bad for their family if someone as dependable as Shou were part of it. Royland felt betrayed by her words. Shou laughed it off, thinking it was just a common joke in their village. Shou couldn't believe a farewell could feel so melancholic. He was glad that his first stop had been in Fermi village. As he looked around, he noticed that Podon was missing. Just then, Podon arrived, apologizing for being late. He appeared riding in a carriage with Sanalia. He said it would take 3 days on foot to reach Grandel. While he couldn't take Shou all the way to the city, he could at least give him a ride halfway. Sanalia coughed as a signal, causing Podon to panic and make up an excuse about selling some things, saying it was just a coincidence they were heading in the same direction. Shou happily accepted their offer. Anna told Shou to take care, and he returned the sentiment to everyone in the village. Thus, Shou's time in Fermi village came to an end, and it was time for him to discover new materials and forge new friendships along the way. Soon after, Shou noticed more people and buildings along the way. Podon explained that this was what they should expect as they got closer to Grandel. Just then, someone asked them to stop for a moment and inquired if they were on a journey. Podon asked if something was wrong. The man said he had run out of mana stones before reaching Grandel and asked Podon if he could spare some. Podon apologized, saying he didn't have any extra. Shou then offered to help and asked how many mana stones the man needed. They exchanged the stones, and the man thanked Shou for saving him. Shou tried to say it was no problem but froze when he saw the man remove his hat in respect. The man invited Shou for a drink if they met again in town. Shou was surprised to learn that the man was a werewolf. As the man walked away, Shou struggled to find the right words to describe him. Podon wondered if it was Shou's first time meeting a beastman. He explained that there were many different races in the cities: beastmen, elves, dwarves, and more. Hearing this, Shou became excited about meeting others along the way. Podon was surprised that Shou didn't know about these races, especially since he was knowledgeable about materials. He called Shou a strange person. After some time, Shou said goodbye to the couple. After changing carriages several times, he finally reached the city of Grandel. Shou found the busy scene amazing, just like back on Earth. He could see a variety of races among the people. Just then, a guard stopped the carriage Shou was riding in for inspection. The guard asked where Shou came from. Shou replied that he came from Fermi village. No worries, he had documents as identification from God. The guard then asked Shou about his purpose in coming to Grandel. Shou said he wanted to register at the Adventurers Guild. The guard then gave him a pass and welcomed him to the city. Inside the city walls, people of different races walked around in the hustle and bustle. Since Shou came from the quiet Fermi village, he felt a bit overwhelmed by the city. As he turned his head in all directions, searching for an inn, someone suddenly called out to him. A cat girl appeared and pounced on him. She asked if Shou was looking for an inn and introduced herself as Mia, an innkeeper of Cat's Tail Inn, the best inn on the main street. She assumed Shou was a newcomer to the city and offered some affordable room rates. Seeing her cat ears and tail and hearing her speak with Enya, Shou wondered if all catfolk were like her. Shou said he still needed to look around and consider his options. Mia began to panic and offered 2 meals a day for 1 silver coin, insisting there were no other affordable inns nearby. She also mentioned that the shopping district, Adventurers Guild, and a public bath were close by. Hearing the word bath made Shuu decide to stay at Mia's inn. Mia was surprised that Shuu suddenly chose her place. The price was twice that of Anna's inn, but considering the location, it was a reasonable rate. Shuu casually said he liked baths, and Mia called him strange. Nevertheless, it was a good thing that the number of customers was increasing, and Mia welcomed Shuu to her inn. The two soon arrived at the Cat's Tail Inn, where Mia held the door open for Shuu, who was captivated by the cat-shaped signboard. Inside, there were many people from different races. Mia explained that the first floor held the front desk and dining hall, and that it turned into a tavern at night. Shuu found the place to have a warm atmosphere. Even more interesting, it was a cat hotel, staffed by catfolk, making it feel like a Nico cafe from Earth. Mia asked Shuu how he liked their inn. Just then, someone scolded Mia for being late and asked her to help. Mia explained that she had been showing a guest around. From her colleague's comment, Shuu realized that not all catfolk say Enya. Mia then led Shuu to his room. It wasn't very spacious, but it was clean. Mia mentioned that the inn had one strict rule that absolutely must not be broken. Shuu felt a bit nervous upon hearing that. Mia then explained that guests must never touch the catfolk staff's ears or tails. She disliked how some humans found it amusing to touch them, but for the catfolk it was surprising and rude. Shuu understood, knowing that nobody likes being touched by strangers. He promised to keep the rule in mind and felt a little guilty for initially comparing the inn to a Neko cafe from Earth. Mia was glad he understood. She then told him to rest and relax, walking away. As she did, Shuu called out, asking her one last thing. Shortly after, Shuu was soaking in a nice warm bath. He had been able to wash his body and hair before, but nothing compared to the feeling of relaxing in hot water. However, this public bath wasn't an onsen, as it only had a magical device to heat the water. If Shuu had tried using his uncontrollable fire magic, it would have caused a mess. After noticing the pleasant scent of the bath, Shuu spotted another person quietly murmuring to himself while holding something. Shuu greeted him and asked what he was up to. The man, whose bangs covered his face like a character out of a hentai, explained he was mixing herbs into the bath as per the owner's request. Shuu realized he was in a herbal bath, and the man confirmed it was designed to help adventurers relieve fatigue and heal wounds. He explained it was part of his research as an apothecary, as he regularly adjusted the herb mixtures. Shuu introduced himself, mentioning that he had just arrived in the city and shared that he liked the bath. The man was pleased, as it was important to him. As the man got out of the water, Shuu complimented his hard work. Shuu then continued his soak, wanting to take full advantage of the herb's effects before heading to the guild the following day. He wondered how far he could go as a beginner, even with divine power, but for some reason, he felt nervous. The next morning, his nerves intensified as he stood in front of the guild's massive building. Unlike in games, he couldn't instantly see others' ranks or levels, but he could sense their experience. A beastman passing by told him to quit standing frozen in front of the entrance and keep moving. Shuu pulled himself together, deciding to walk in confidently so he wouldn't be underestimated. As expected, there were many people inside, even busier than the streets outside. Shuu noticed a lot of job seekers were becoming adventurers, which made him wonder if the pay was good. This was clear from how long the line at the reception was. While looking around, he saw a large crowd gathered in front of a bulletin board. Though he appreciated being younger, his short height was inconvenient here. When Shuu managed to peek through the crowd, he spotted request forms pinned on the board. The number of posted requests made Shuu realize how trusted the guild was. Curious, he checked what was listed. Requests for monster exterminations of varying difficulties filled the board. Shuu thought it might be thanks to the guild's protection that he had arrived in Grandel safely. On his way there, he had encountered a few horned rabbits while gathering materials and wondered if the monsters around Grandel were tougher. However, he quickly dismissed the thought since he was a material gatherer, not a fighter, and moved on. Shuu then found the request board for material gathering. A variety of materials were listed, many of which Shuu hadn't heard of before. He wondered if he could take on all the tasks regardless of their difficulty. Seeing how worn the papers looked, Shuu guessed that material gathering quests weren't very popular. Finding it wasteful, he decided to tidy up the request board on his own. A rabbit folk named Rabis introduced herself as the one in charge of reception. Shuu introduced himself and asked if he could take 2 material gathering requests from the board he'd just checked. He explained that he loved gathering materials and that this was his first time doing it through the guild. Shu's enthusiasm was a bit overwhelming for Rabis, so she asked him to pause for a moment. Rabis understood that Shuu was new to the guild, so she decided to explain the system. She told him that all registered adventurers had ranks, starting from F, the lowest, up to S, the highest. Each quest was assigned based on rank. Since Shuu was a beginner, he was automatically at F rank, and his advancement would depend on the number of achievements and completed requests. She further explained that each request also had its own rank designation, meaning Shou could only take material gathering quests up to E rank in difficulty. She also warned him about the penalty for failing a quest. Shou apologized for his earlier excitement. After the orientation, Rabis proceeded with the registration process. She took out a plate and asked Shou to infuse his magical power into it. Curious, Shou asked what it was, and Rabis explained that it was used to manage request statuses in the guild. By registering the magical wave pattern, the guild could identify and track an individual's progress and history of accepted requests. Shou was impressed by this, and he then infused his magical power into the plate. However, the plate cracked in half, leaving both Shou and Rabis speechless. Shou panicked, apologized for breaking it, and offered to pay for it. But Rabis looked more confused than upset since the plate was made of magic crystal. She claimed the plate must have been degraded and offered to bring out another one. Shou realized he needed to be more careful about adjusting his magic in situations like this. Rabis brought out a new plate, and Shou recalled God's advice to get used to his magical power. This time, he successfully infused his magic into the plate without breaking it. Rabis congratulated Shou, saying that the registration was now complete. She then asked if he planned to only register or if he wanted to start taking requests immediately. Shou smiled and enthusiastically replied that he wanted to take on requests, as he had been looking forward to it. It was the first time Rabis had seen someone so excited about registering for quests. She quickly realized that Shou really loved gathering materials. Curious, she asked him which quest he planned to take. Shou didn't hesitate and immediately asked about the quests for Azami herbs and light bugs. Rabis, surprised, reminded Shou that as an F-rank adventurer, those were actually E-rank quests. Shou then reminded her of her own explanation about his maximum difficulty level being E. Though Rabis remembered saying that, she worried the tasks might be too hard for someone of Shou's rank. She also feared he might fail, which would hurt the guild's reputation. Since she already had a broken plate from a past mishap, Rabis didn't want to cause more trouble for the guild. Shou understood her concerns and agreed to be cautious with his choices. Relieved, Rabis suggested a few quests more suitable for his rank and presented 3 options for him to pick from. But Shou, without hesitation, said he'd take all 3. Rabis was stunned and quickly warned him about the risk of failing and the strict deadlines, but Shou wasn't worried. He simply loved gathering materials too much to back down. Resigned, Rabis registered all 3 quests under Shou's name and told him he had 2 days to complete them. When Shou admitted he didn't know the terms written on the quests, he asked if they had any samples of the actual items as he wasn't familiar with them. Rabis was speechless for a moment, but eventually brought out some samples for him to study. Shou soon arrived at his destination and noticed that there weren't many monsters around. After being scolded by Rabis, he knew he needed to investigate thoroughly. He was glad he could appraise things in person. His main goal was to find Arukinoko, an edible mushroom that walks away when it senses danger, and Krasenka honey, a sweet floral honey with multiple uses. Shou didn't know exactly how to gather the honey, but he felt confident he'd figure it out. While he already had mint leaves from before, these other 2 ingredients were things he hadn't encountered in person yet. Using his detect skill, Shou searched specifically for the Arukinoko, and he was thrilled to see there were plenty in the area. He felt grateful to Rabis for showing him good spots to look. As he searched, he spotted a group of Arukinokos at the base of a tree. Curious about their appearance, he wondered if they might be a different species. When he tried to touch one, the mushroom suddenly jumped away, like something straight out of a video game, and ran off, leaving Shou baffled. Then he remembered reading about how the mushroom would flee from threats. Panicking a bit, he chased after it, though he quickly realized the mushroom was moving quite slowly. It had legs, but with such a low speed, Shou wondered what the point was. Unfortunately, his actions triggered the other Arukinokos nearby, and they all started running away from him as if he were a giant monster. Despite the unexpected turn of events, Shou just smiled and walked alongside the fleeing mushrooms. He found their little parade adorable. Snapping back to his task, Shou started gathering the mushrooms, pleased with his successful harvest. Shou counted the mushrooms he had gathered, and upon reaching 30, finally completed the second request. Next on the list was the Krasenka honey. Through his appraisal skill, Shou could only identify it as a seasoning. Curious about what it looked like, he used his detect skill to search for it. Back at the guild, a different receptionist mentioned to Rabis that Shou seemed interesting. Rabis firmly disagreed, as she disliked Shou's confidence in taking on a higher-ranked request despite being a newcomer. And he had even broken a plate. Another woman with pointed ears overheard and joined in. Rabis called her Sharedi and asked if anyone else had broken a plate before, like Sharedi then shared a story. Many decades ago, a powerful mage who served the royal court had visited the guild as a prank and tried to register as an adventurer. The girls started gossiping about Sharedi's age, joking that she must be old to know such stories, but Sharedi brushed it off and continued. Much like Shuu, the powerful mage had broken a plate during registration. The mage had simply laughed and claimed the plate couldn't handle his magical power before leaving. Rabus then speculated that Shou might have magical powers similar to those of the royal court mage in the story. Shiredi agreed, though the girl still doubted it due to Shou's laid-back attitude. Rabus pointed out that Shou's magical power and his ability to complete requests were entirely different things. She noted that 80% of newcomers failed to collect the honey. Remembering Shou's confidence about completing the task, she couldn't wait to see him fail. Shou returned to the guild reporting that he had safely collected everything. Rabus was surprised to see him back already, as he had only left that morning. Shou wondered aloud if he shouldn't submit the materials on the same day. Rabus clarified that it wasn't the timing, but the difficulty of the request that surprised her. She composed herself as she recalled the honey, explaining that speed alone wasn't everything. The quality of the materials mattered too, so she would check them thoroughly. Shou encouraged her to go ahead. Rabus then remembered that the Krasenka flower released a slight poison into its cup-like structure, which would make the honey bitter if not collected correctly. Confident that Shou wasn't aware of this, she began her inspection, using her appraisal glasses. To her shock, the honey was of the highest quality and the mint leaves and mushrooms were also in perfect condition. Shou felt pleased to have met her expectations and held back a question, wondering if the honey request was a trap for beginners. Rabus was momentarily speechless, realizing how dedicated Shou was to gathering quality materials. She apologized for underestimating him and moved on to reward him for completing the requests. Shou happily walked through the city streets, proud of his earnings thanks to the high-quality materials. He felt he would rely even more on his appraisal skill from now on. Returning to the inn, he noticed it was livelier at night. However, with all the noise, he decided to enjoy his meal quietly in his room. Just then, Mia called out to Shou, asking how his first day at work had gone. Shou was glad she spoke to him, even though she looked busy in the tavern. However, he quickly realized she was just trying to get him to spend his hard-earned money. Since he was in a good mood, he decided to order a drink or two. Mia, pleased, invited him to sit at a table, saying she wanted him to meet someone. Shou was left feeling confused, but Mia assumed he would understand once he followed her. He wondered if a fan had shown up, but then Mio suddenly called out a strong-sounding name, Grandel. A large bearman greeted Shou, Grandel, the head chef of the inn. Mia had asked Grandel to join them because of his impressive skills. Grandel shook Shou's hand warmly and introduced himself in a friendly way. Shou was happy with just the greeting, but then Grandel surprised him by presenting an incredible feast as a way to welcome him. Shou thought Grandel seemed like a very nice person. However, Grandel quickly explained that the feast was just a formality. He liked to know his customers' tastes because he didn't want to serve food that they wouldn't enjoy. Shou realized that Grandel had adjusted his menu for each guest, which he had found impressive. The feast seemed far more luxurious than anything Shou had seen in Fermi village. Grandel mentioned that he used rare ingredients from the city and promised a unique flavor. Shou then began to eat, but he paused when he noticed a strange-looking fish on his plate. Grandel laughed and reassured him that the fish tasted delicious despite its odd appearance. Feeling a bit pressured, Shou took a bite, and to his surprise, the fish really did taste amazing. It was soft and fluffy with herbs and spices grilled to perfection. Shou couldn't help but compliment the flavors. Grandel was pleased as he presented the next dish, a massive steak. Shou asked if it was really okay for him to have it, and Grandel happily confirmed. Shou thanked him again and eagerly took a bite. He paused, noticing the bold, intense flavor of the meat, but the fresh berry sauce balanced it perfectly. Curious, he asked what kind of meat it was, and Grandel told him it was orc meat. Shou froze for a moment, double-checking if it was the type of monster he knew. Grandel confirmed, explaining that monster cuisine had become popular recently. If cooked well, it was a delight to eat. Although Shou looked a bit uneasy, he admitted it was delicious thanks to Grandel's skill. Grandel smiled and urged him to keep eating. After finishing the meal, Shou felt satisfied and promised to properly thank Grandel next time. Grandel, however, was a bit annoyed and insisted Shou show his gratitude right then. He asked Shou if he could bring any rare ingredients next time. Grandel explained that he wanted to showcase his cooking skills, but rare ingredients usually went straight to the guild, where they were sold at high prices. He wished he could get his hands on some directly. Just then, an adventurer mentioned he had some rare herbs for Grandel. Grandel thanked him, and the adventurer seemed to expect something in return. Shou picked up on this and asked Grandel what the man was looking forward to. Grandel explained that he often cooked meals with ingredients people brought him, which encouraged many to share rare items with him. Shou liked the idea and struck a deal with the cook. Since they were already discussing ingredients, Shou decided to show Grandel some. Grandel was surprised to see fresh Arukinoko Krasenka's honey. Being a bear, he personally wanted to buy it. He praised Shou's skill in finding such fresh ingredients. Meanwhile, a man sitting at a nearby table overheard their conversation and recognized Shou's name. The following week, Rabus checked the materials required for the quest, confirming everything was in order. Shou thanked her for the confirmation, and Rabus remarked that she was impressed with how well he was doing despite being new. She mentioned that adventurers who gathered high-quality materials on tight deadlines could gradually build a strong reputation. Shou felt pleased to hear this and was also glad that Rabus was becoming friendlier toward him. Initially, she had viewed him as unskilled and unreliable. However, Shou was determined to raise his rank quickly so he could collect a broader range of materials. Rabus agreed, noting that material gathering quests typically earned fewer rank points, making them less efficient for rank advancement. But she had some good news for Shou. She pulled out a parchment and asked him to take a look. Shou asked what it was, and Rabus explained with excitement that it was a direct request specifically for him. Shou looked puzzled, not quite understanding. Rabus explained that while most adventurers usually picked quests from the bulletin board, this time someone had requested Shou personally for a material gathering mission. Shou asked if such a thing was even allowed, and Rabus explained that some clients, pressed for time, preferred to assign tasks to adventurers they trusted. With the bulletin board system, clients never knew who would take the quest. Shou agreed with this and then asked who had specifically requested him. Rabus replied that it was unusual for an F-ranked adventurer to be chosen directly, but word of Shou's recent successes must have reached the client. She added that direct requests came with better rewards and, above all, were significant opportunities. She urged Shou to at least meet the client and hear out their request. Shou soon arrived at the client's residence, expecting to meet someone from the inn. Instead, the requester was a man named Klaus. Feeling a bit nervous since the request only mentioned they needed to meet and talk, Shou passed through the fences and garden, eventually spotting a cozy-looking house that reminded him of a scene from a picture book. A sign with the word medicine confirmed his guess that the requester might be a pharmacist. Since entering the garden, he'd noticed a distinct herbal scent and assumed medicinal plants were growing nearby. He appraised some of the plants, confirming his suspicions. Although intrigued by the herbs, he knew he couldn't casually pick them from someone else's garden. He also noticed a greenhouse packed with medicinal herbs and felt excited, itching to appraise them. Just then, a man approached and asked what Shou was doing. This man, wearing glasses and exuding a fatherly vibe, startled Shou, who quickly apologized and asked if he was Klaus. When Shou greeted him as if they'd never met, the man's expression turned serious. He asked if Shou really didn't remember him. Shou flinched and nervously asked if they'd met before. Without a word, Klaus lowered his bangs and Shou suddenly recognized him. It was the herbalist he'd met at the bathhouse. Klaus looked disappointed, sulking as he realized Shou hadn't recognized him right away. Trying to cheer him up, Shou praised the quality of the herbs used in the bath and thanked him for making a direct request. Klaus's mood brightened as he proudly claimed his concoctions were naturally top-notch. He then suggested they get started and invited Shou inside to discuss the details of the request. Klaus's house was messy, but every ingredient was important, so he asked Shou not to touch anything. Shou was amazed by the different scents in the room. They weren't unpleasant at all, but rather calming, almost like being at his grandmother's house. Klaus then led Shou to the reception room where things were tidier and asked him to wait there. As Shou looked around, he noticed even more ingredients, many of which he'd never seen before. He wanted to examine everything closely but held back to avoid spoiling the experience. When Klaus returned, he noticed how eagerly Shou was observing the ingredients and wondered if Shou was interested in medicine. Shou explained that he simply got excited when he saw new ingredients. Klaus mentioned hearing about a strange adventurer who was enthusiastic about gathering materials and called Shou a weird guy. Shou apologized, and Klaus suggested they take a break first. He prepared tea using some medicinal herbs, claiming it could relieve fatigue. Shou accepted the tea but was startled by its bitterness. Klaus assured him that the taste was normal for herbal tea, although it seemed like Klaus himself wasn't enjoying the bitterness either. Shou suddenly thought of something and offered to add a bit of sweetness to the tea. Curious, Klaus asked what he had in mind, and Shou showed him the Krasenka honey he still had, which could sweeten the tea. Klaus was impressed that Shou had obtained something so nice. Shou explained how he'd gotten it just the other day. Klaus repeated his comment about the honey, making Shou realize he wanted some too. Shou offered to add it to Klaus's cup, and Klaus's expression brightened as he jokingly acted like Shou was forcing the honey on him. Shou was slowly getting a sense of Klaus's personality. The two then took a sip of their improvised tea, and Shou noticed the bitterness had faded. Klaus remarked that he might even recommend it to his customers. Shou saw him smile for the first time, which surprised Klaus before he quickly got back to the main topic. Klaus showed an illustration of a plant called Yamadokoro. It had a heart-shaped leaf, making it easy to recognize, but its medicinal value lay in the root. Shou assumed he just needed to dig up the root from the ground. However, Klaus explained that this was where the real challenge began. The roots of the Yamadokoro were extremely fragile, and even a small stone bumping against them could damage their nutrients. Their shape was complex, and breaking a large, curved lateral root would be a failure. Shuu realized that this wouldn't be as simple as unearthing typical root crops. Klaus added that once the Yamadokoro was removed from the soil, the fine root hairs around it had to be quickly trimmed off. Besides just locating the plants, some ingredients needed this level of delicate handling. This challenge sparked something in Shuu. The second ingredient was bellflower, a common wildflower, but Klaus needed ones with only 3 petals. Normally bellflowers had 4 petals, but those were too weak to be used for medicine. Shuu felt even more motivated. The final ingredient was the Kurtzfruit, which became more potent when infused with magical power. Klaus wanted Shuu to collect them while adding as much magical power as possible. However, adding too much would make the fruit burst, so it required a precise touch, not too little, and not for too long. After collecting, the fruit had to be delivered right away or the magical power would fade. Shuu's determination grew stronger with each instruction. Klaus finished by saying these 3 were the main target ingredients for his request. He reminded Shuu to be careful, or he wouldn't pay the full reward. Seeing Shuu's silence, Klaus asked what he thought of the request and suggested declining if it seemed too troublesome. However, Shuu was more fired up than ever and accepted the challenge. Watching Shuu's excitement, Klaus realized fully just how unusual Shuu really was. Shuu needed to gather 3 Yamadokoro, 7 bellflowers, and 10 Kurtzfruits. Klaus reminded him not to forget the handling methods he had just explained. Shuu assured him he would handle it, but before he left he asked Klaus if he had any extras on hand. Klaus replied that he wouldn't have asked Shuu if he had them himself. Shuu had expected this. With a 7-day deadline, he promised to return quickly once he finished gathering the ingredients. Klaus was counting on him, and in a flash, Shuu had already disappeared from view. Klaus then realized he'd forgotten to mention the reward and wondered why Shuu hadn't asked, since rewards usually mattered most to adventurers. He realized that Shuu was focused solely on collecting the materials. On his way home, Shuu reviewed the notes Klaus had given him, and the day soon came to an end. The next morning, Mira was surprised to see Shuu heading out so early. She asked with concern if he was overwhelmed with requests. Shuu claimed he was just so eager to gather materials that he couldn't sleep. Mira still wished him a safe and careful journey. Shuu set off on his gathering quest. According to Klaus, the 3 ingredients were located near the eastern forest. Of the 3, the bellflower had the widest distribution, so Shuu decided to search for that one first. Looking for a 3-petaled bellflower felt like hunting for a 4-leaf clover. Although he found it challenging, he seemed excited by the search. Shuu finally reached the eastern forest. He could have used Detect right away, but he hadn't actually seen the real thing yet. Since he'd received the power from God, he assumed he could register the ingredient by seeing it in the book. He decided to try using Detect to find bellflower. As expected, nothing happened. Shuu then chose to search carefully, and soon the whole forest shimmered with lights highlighting nearby ingredients and materials. He saw shapes he hadn't noticed before. Some even pointed to rare materials. However, Shuu reminded himself to stay focused on his main goal. He decided to look for the 4-petaled bellflower first as a reference, and just then, a bush of them appeared in front of him. He appraised it, confirming it matched Klaus's description. Shuu realized the 3-petaled ones were even more valuable based on appraisal's description. With the wildflower now recognized in his mind, Shuu used Detect on the bellflower again. This time he set the filter to focus solely on the wildflower, but his Detect skill still highlighted many scattered around the forest. It would have been a hassle to check them all one by one, but he suddenly noticed a unique color among the lights. Surprised, Shuu recalled that the light from Detect indicated the rarity of the material. Not wanting to get his hopes up, he hurried toward the spot with a different light. To his amazement, he found a 3-petaled bellflower. He had completely forgotten that Detect sorted materials by different colors based on rarity. 2 voices in Shuu's mind argued over what he should do. Finish the quest quickly by using Detect, but he resolved not to rely entirely on the skill and decided to find the remaining 4 3-petaled bellflowers on his own. Shuu then searched without using his skill but couldn't find more. As night fell, Shuu finally managed to gather the 7 requested 3-petaled bellflowers. His back ached and he was extremely hungry. He hadn't expected it to be so challenging and now fully understood Klaus's warnings. Yet the exhaustion he felt seemed to embody the true essence of material gathering. Despite that, Shuu had come to appreciate that using the God-given Detect skill remained unbeatable. The next morning arrived, and Shuu groaned as he lay in bed. He still hadn't recovered from the previous day's work, but he needed to get up since materials were waiting for him. This time, he would be digging, so he needed a shovel. He then noticed something in his bag and remembered Grandel. The day before, Shuu had gone downstairs and Grandel had told him he made something for him. However, Grandel had looked more concerned by how exhausted Shuu appeared, as if he'd aged a year in a single day. Shuu just laughed it off and apologized. Grandel then rummaged through the kitchen and brought out a lunch basket for Shuu. Shuu felt deeply touched and burst into tears. He thanked Grandel with a bow and promised to give it his all. Due to his fatigue, Shuu had completely forgotten about the lunch. Thankfully, with his magic bag, he didn't have to worry about it spoiling. With Grandel's lunch in hand, Shuu felt he'd have the strength of 100 men. He set off, ready to gather the materials that awaited him. Shuu soon arrived at a lake where the water was crystal clear, a perfect spot for relaxing. He knew the Yamadokuro plant preferred areas near water, but he wasn't sure if he'd found the right location. Following his usual method, he activated *detect* and scanned the area. Within a minute, he spotted some heart-shaped leaves. Using *appraisal*, he confirmed he had indeed found the Yamadokuro. Shuu moved forward to start digging up the roots, but the muddy ground made things difficult. He sighed, realizing it would be yet another day of physical effort. After removing his long coat, he dug as much as he could around the plant but couldn't see any roots yet. Frustrated, he decided to dig deeper and drove the shovel in with all his strength, only to accidentally break off a piece of one of the roots. Shuu groaned, wishing he had some kind of see-through ability to avoid damaging them. Just then he remembered how *detect* allowed him to sense the shapes of materials from a distance. If he could concentrate harder, he thought he might even be able to see underground. He gave it a try, focusing more intensely and using detect on the Yamadokuro roots. To his relief, he was able to make out the shapes and locations of the roots deep beneath the surface. Feeling grateful for his detect skill, Shuu resumed digging carefully. If everything went smoothly, he figured he would finish by the afternoon. However, his digging was soon interrupted by his grumbling stomach. Shuu glanced at his magic bag and decided to enjoy the lunch Grandel had prepared for him. Soon after, Shuu used a water ball to clean himself up. He was glad he could now adjust his magical power. Thanks to the detect skill, he had harvested a lot of Yamadokuro. He became so absorbed in digging that he didn't mind being covered in mud. Now that he was all cleaned up, he opened Grandel's lunch basket and found a pie made from arukinoko mushrooms. It looked fluffy and thick. Shuu also noticed the nice aroma of mushrooms and cheese. When he finally took a bite, he was surprised by the wonderful cooked aroma of the arukinoko. It tasted like a mix of shiitake and matsutake mushrooms, which doubled the flavor. The umami spread throughout his mouth and perfectly complemented the cheese. Shuu couldn't help but call Grandel a genius. After his meal, Shuu happily lay down, enjoying the peaceful moment for a while until he realized he almost fell asleep. He reminded himself that he still needed to collect one more material at Klaus's request. The Kurtz fruit was the last item on his list. Shuu soon reached a denser part of the eastern forest. It looked like monsters could appear at any moment. According to Klaus, the Kurtz fruit only grew deep in the forest where there was no sunlight. Shuu knew that monsters were part of the material gathering process, but he still had a trump card. He used detect and countless monsters appeared on Shuu's radar. He realized he couldn't avoid them and hoped the ones that appeared in front of him would be easy to handle. He noticed some agile-looking bugs, some furious bipedal monsters, and some caterpillar-like creatures. The path with the caterpillars seemed safe since Shuu assumed they would move very slowly. As a gamer, he thought insect types might have poison, so he needed to be prepared. He also had to be careful of other monsters along the way. Despite the known danger, Shuu moved forward. After a minute, Shuu encountered the caterpillar monster called Kayapil. They attacked any intruders with their sticky threads. However, the threads were popular as a material for high-quality fabrics. Despite this interesting information, Shuu felt scared since he was not good with bugs. The Kayapil focused on its meal and hadn't noticed Shuu yet. He tried to slip through without being seen, but he accidentally stepped on a branch. The Kayapil noticed him and began to attack. Shuu ran away and hid behind a tree. He felt confident that he wouldn't get hit, and since the Kayapil was slow, he believed he would be safe for a while. As expected, the Kayapil stopped attacking after some time. The high-quality threads it spat out hung everywhere, but Shuu decided to focus on escaping as his life mattered more. Shuu managed to get away and didn't see any monsters nearby after walking a distance. He used detect again and found a lot of rare materials. There were many similar-looking fruits, and it was hard to tell which ones were the Kurtz fruits. He recalled the rough illustration from Klaus's books. As a challenge, Shuu decided not to use appraisal to see if he could figure it out by himself. He checked the similar-looking fruits, but their colors were different from the descriptions. Finally, he discovered a fruit that matched the description perfectly. Shuu used appraisal to confirm it, and it was indeed the Kurtz fruit. He found it fun to gather materials without using his skills and wished he had an encyclopedia to carry around. Here came the main point: harvesting the Kurtz fruit while infusing magical power without making it burst. Since he was improving every day, Shuu felt confident that he wouldn't repeat the incident where he broke a plate. However, he jinxed himself and the fruit burst upon contact. Shuu couldn't believe how delicate the fruit was, since he only applied the minimal magical power he could. As expected, Klaus's request was not easy to fulfill. Shou took this as a challenge to gather the highest quality Kurtz fruits. Shou did his best, cheering himself on as he worked. Some animals started watching him out of curiosity. He checked his progress and saw he'd managed to infuse magical power into 10 Kurtz fruits without bursting them. Since every second counted, he quickly put the fruits in his magic bag to keep the power from leaking out. However, the fruits he had collected earlier were already deflated and varied in size. Shou had fun testing his limits but figured Klaus might scold him for submitting fruits of different sizes. He thought about fixing the issue immediately, but since it was getting dark, he decided to head back to the city for now. Shou realized he'd gotten the hang of adjusting his magical power and expected to do better on future quests with this new experience. By the time he reached Klaus's place, it was already dark. Shou paced back and forth in front of the house, worried he might be bothering Klaus. He noticed a light in the greenhouse and assumed Klaus was there. Klaus soon spotted him and asked if he had questions about the quest. Shou casually mentioned he'd already collected everything. Klaus, shocked that only 2 days had passed, asked if the quantity was correct. Shou confirmed he had all the fruits, and Klaus, surprised, asked him to show them. Klaus and Shou stepped inside, and Klaus asked Shou to bring out the Kurtz fruits first, as they needed to be processed quickly before the magical energy faded. Shou assured him not to worry, explaining that the fruits wouldn't degrade inside his magic bag. Klaus asked if Shou's bag was really magical, and warned him not to casually mention it to others. If he were a villain, Klaus said, Shou could be in serious danger since a magic bag was highly valuable. Shou remembered that Podan had also been surprised by the bag, but he hadn't stayed cautious since Podan accepted his fake inheritance story without much concern. Shou then thanked Klaus for being a good person, and Klaus responded that Shou should consider himself lucky. With the Kurtz fruits safely stored, Klaus asked for the bellflowers and Yamadokoro next. He confirmed that the bellflowers indeed had 3 petals each, and that the Yamadokoro were undamaged, with their root hairs carefully removed. He approved the materials, and Shou felt relieved. Klaus praised Shou for collecting them properly on his first try. Now the issue was with the Kurtz fruits. Klaus was surprised at how large they were. He'd never seen any that big before, and asked Shou how much magical power he had infused into them. He figured that with so much energy, they should have burst. Achieving such a size meant someone had excellent control over magical energy. Shou admitted that only one of the fruits was unusually large, while the others were smaller. He brought out the rest and apologized for not processing them properly. Klaus sighed and called Shou hopelessly kind, jokingly asking if Shou would just let him take the materials without payment if he asked. Shou couldn't think of a response. Then Klaus admitted that Shou had exceeded his expectations. He encouraged Shou to have confidence in his work, warning that others would take advantage of him otherwise. Shou took the advice seriously. Klaus then became serious and commented that the giant Kurtz fruit had double the value. If he bought everything, he would go over his budget, so he could only afford 6 of them. Shou said he didn't mind if Klaus took everything. Klaus frowned and reminded him not to let people take advantage of him so easily. Klaus decided to buy the original quantity of bellflowers and Yamadokoro, but he would adjust the Kurtz fruit order to just 6. He showed Shou the reward and asked if it was acceptable. Shou was shocked by the amount, even with the reduced quantity. Klaus said it was fair for the quality of Shou's work and asked him to accept it. Shou gratefully thanked him. With their transaction completed, Klaus said he needed to process the ingredients as soon as possible. He then mentioned that Shou could sell any leftover materials to an alchemist instead of a guild, though it was just an option. Shou was surprised, as he had never heard of alchemists in this world. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 24. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.